Amen. Well, it's good to see you all here tonight, and we're glad that I know we have some that are watching tonight, maybe from Atria, so good to see you this evening. I like to do that every once in a while, just acknowledging them and our ladies that do a little of sickle work, reaping the harvest a little bit. We're going to look tonight at the year of Jubilee. This is actually Israel's Jubilee. I probably, if I'd have thought about it, rename that just Israel's year of Jubilee, because I didn't even know there were others that have tried to celebrate, rename, reframe this year of Jubilee. And I'm not going to get into what denomination does that, but they have nothing to do with the reality of what this year of Jubilee is. Well, we're going to be looking at Leviticus chapter 25, begin with verses 8 through 11, and then we'll come back to that and really surround a lot of the verses that are in that same chapter. And so let's start. Now shalt number 7 sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years. And the space of the seven Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the day of atonement shall ye make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and ye shall return every man unto his possession, and ye shall return every man unto his family. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself in it, nor gathereth the grapes in it of thy vine undressed. Just to give you a little bit to the year, of course, Jubilee was to be a proclamation, a year of proclaiming liberty. We just recently, our country did celebrate our year of liberty. And next year will be the big shebang of celebrating 250 years as a nation, where we proclaimed liberty from Great Britain. Well, this is much more profound than that. God instructed Israel about their calendar, and that calendar regarded, in this particular case, regarded their inheritance, their property rights, and even their debt. It affected their economics. It affected their loan system. It affected a whole lot of things. He gave them economic instructions which affected their lending and their borrowing practices. Their calendar year was very exact and filled with days of national significance. In the year of Jubilee, or the 50th year following those 7 sevens, all lands and houses were returned to the original owner or the inheritor. All debts were forgiven and considered paid in full. All loans and all terms were dictated by God according to the number of years remaining until that 50th year of Jubilee. Remember, if you're going to make a loan, it would make a lot of difference, because if it was 2 years until that year of Jubilee, you only have 2 years. And then it's all going to be done, over with. If there were any that were indentured slaves or prisoners, they were to be set free and sent home. The significance of these years and their types and illustrations, to me, are of profound impact and should be of great interest. Some see clear indicators of prophecy, but all of us should see the gospel and the salvation of God's elect. Jesus, in fact, came himself preaching an inferred year of Jubilee when he spoke in Luke about the captive being set free in that particular year of the Lord. Now, I'm going to use 4 different words tonight to help us in our study and remind us what the section is about. We're going to be looking at the words remember, release, restore, and rest. Now, I may use a form of those first 3 a little bit different. They remembered or released or restoration, but we're going to use those particular words. In fact, when we use our first word, remembered, it was to be remembered every 49th year or 50th year, but 49th year, and coming up what it was to coincide with the Day of Atonement. The year of Jubilee was a holy year, a holy moment, if you will, and it was celebrated in particular on that Day of Atonement. If you remember, when we look at this, thou shalt number 7 sabbaths of years unto the 7, unto these 7 times 7 years, and the space of 7 sabbaths of 7 years shall be 49 years. And thou shalt cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day, the 7th year, in the Day of Atonement shall you make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. Because it was such a major economical impact on their nation, they would always remember 50 years. Every bit of their loan, their economy. If a person were to indenture himself to pay off his debts in that way, which they could do, it would always be done with a view towards that year of Jubilee. But that day also coincided, as I said, with the Day of Atonement. Israel was taught the gospel a lot of times by illustrations. They were taught the gospel by certain rites and ceremonies and by their celebrations. You think about the lamb slain or the blood shed and then the blood anointed on the mercy seat. That's what made their redemption, and I'm talking about complete redemption, possible. Sacrifice for sin was possible for every man and every woman, every child at any time. The atonement was made but once a year, and the year of Jubilee, of course, was every 50 years. Through various circumstances, again, they could suffer economic loss and find the only thing of value and means of support could be their property, or it could be their home, or it could even be themselves in some sort of service. All Israel had the same rules concerning their land. If you were from a different tribe, you could remain the owner of another tribe's property, but for a maximum of 49 years. You could only sell yourself into slavery or service for a maximum of 49 years. It is the year of Jubilee. When we look a little bit further, Leviticus chapter 25, verses 12 through 16, says, For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy unto you, and ye shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. In the year of Jubilee ye shall return every man unto his possession. And if thou sell aught unto thy neighbor, or buyest aught of thy neighbor's hand, ye shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, thou shalt buy of thy neighbor, and according unto the number of the years of the fruits he shall sell unto thee. According to the multitude of years thou shalt increase the price thereof, and according to the fewness of years thou shalt diminish the price of it. For according to the number of the years of the fruits doth he sell it unto thee. So again, just this was a reminder, and every time you looked even at your business ventures, you would remember the year of Jubilee. You couldn't set it aside. Even though it was only celebrated every 50 years, it would affect every business transaction pretty much of major business transaction that you might have with other people. So you're always going to keep that in mind. So that's why I use the word remember. Then we want to look at the idea of release. They were to proclaim liberty or a release from debt of all inhabitants. This was a time of liberty for everyone in Israel. No one was left in debt. No one was left enslaved. No one was left homeless. And no one was left without their inheritance. And even if you were a stranger in the land, you did not walk away without anything in your hands. In fact, like I said earlier, Jesus preached liberty. John the Baptist preached liberty. Paul preached liberty. Jesus was the one who said, "If the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed." That really is a reference to that. Absolutely and utterly free. This was a special and rare occasion which spoke directly at and to anyone who had lost their inheritance during the last 50 years. Anyone who had lost their liberty because of bad decisions or bad circumstances or because of sin or negligence, all of them would still enjoy this year of Jubilee and liberty. It was a year of release. They could not be denied this liberty because of how or because of what they had done. Freedom, liberty, release was unconditional. Think about that with our own salvation. Freedom was proclaimed, and freedom was to be experienced. Imagine if you or someone you had loved had been sold into slavery, or even had the loss of their home. But it is that year of Jubilee in which you find your debt abolished, your land is returned, and you are free to go. It's the year of release, of liberty. That's a pretty good message, and it was, I'm sure, one of interest to every Israelite there. The year of Jubilee, I would think for some it would be of interest, and they would want to know when it was approaching. There is coming a time for you and I that our year of Jubilee will be experienced, meaning that all of us will be set free. We will be set free from the presence of sin. More so than just the power of sin and the penalty of sin, we will be set free and liberated and released from its presence one of these days. Many of the transactions in which property was sold or a person was indentured, all of them were allowed by law. Both the borrower and the lender were to keep in mind, though, as you saw when we looked at it, where is the year Jubilee? So as we further away, you increase the amount. As you get closer, you diminish the amount. So what do we see? One of the things it teaches is that no man can have two masters, that God really is the owner of the land, and you, Israelite, are just tenants. No man owns another man's land at all because all of it is God's. God is king over all. In fact, we could look at it in Leviticus 25 and verse 23, where it says, "The land shall not be sold forever, for the land," God says, "is mine. For ye are strangers and sojourners with me." Think about that. Everything belongs to the Lord in the first place. Now, there's some things that people will question when we get down here a little bit and a little bit further, but it was also a matter of restoration, of the word restore. It was a matter of restoring property, of family, of freedom, and as we in our families age, we transition from a single unit into several units. You know, you think about it, when I'm talking about originally, it was just Pat and I. Our parents, our siblings, outside of our own family. But pretty soon we had three, and now we have a whole bunch. We've got 11 grandchildren, not including our kids that are there. So you've got a whole lot more when we all get together, and I'm sure it's the same thing with a lot of you. Depending on how many children you have or how many grandchildren you have, yet that unit gets larger. So as families age too, they also move away. They separate for a time. But families reunite, even if it's only for a brief time. And when they reunite, just like we have, it is a very special time when we are reunited. When they reunite, it's a very special moment. And like you, I have experienced those moments. The moment of reuniting is special. I can't imagine how they bore that separation as that day of Jubilee got closer and closer, and how exciting it would be to have your family restored. Their day was without instant ability to communicate. You think about it, even though we're separated, we can talk on the phone visually to people clear across the country. We don't have a problem. It's not just talking on the phone and getting audio. We can see and hear. Imagine the mother receiving her child, or the mother coming home, or maybe it was the father, or because it happened almost 50 years ago, it would be the grandfather now coming home. What a homecoming that must have been. The return of their inheritance secured that their lot would never be lost. That was something certain that God put into the laws, and the laws regarding the land and marriage were regarding the property rights to the land of God. This was God's land, and they were accountable for how it was treated. Yet God was merciful in seeing to it that it was never lost because of their sin. In fact, there's several verses, one in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 18, just to draw your attention, where he says, "And first I will recompense their iniquity and their sin double, because they have defiled my land. They have filled mine inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable things." That's why God says, you can't do this. You're going to suffer for it because it's my land. Deuteronomy 15:2 deals with the release of debt and the return of property, when it says, "And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release." That's important. It was done for the Lord's sake, because it was his command. Do you realize that you and I were forgiven our sins for Christ's sake? Not for anything that we have done, not for any good that we have done. And it's the same thing. We ought to forgive those who have offended us and wronged us for Christ's sake. We've got two verses that teach the same thing. In Ephesians 4:32, "Be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you." A lot of people wonder, well, how do I forgive them? You forgive them for Christ's sake, the same way you got forgiven. Colossians 3:13, "Forbearing one another, forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you." On what basis did he forgive you? On the work that he did himself. "So also do ye." The pardon you and I receive for the sins we committed can never again be visited. Once that debt is forgiven, it could never be brought up again. Isn't that wonderful? That's why God says, "I put your sins behind my back," or as far as the east is from the west. Two, then we learn that something about the word rest. It's very interesting that the land was to rest, just like the men or the man must rest from his labors. In Leviticus chapter 25 and verse 4, he talks about the sabbaths. Every 7 years, the land was to have a year of rest. It was to have a sabbatical. but also then that year of Jubilee was supposed to be the same. In Leviticus 25:4, but in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. Now I can just imagine some farmer or rancher saying, there's no way I couldn't make it if I couldn't plow the field that 7th year. How would you do it? Trust God. He'll prosper you in the years prior to that. If Israel walked in obedience to the Lord, there was no fear necessary about the abundance of the fruit of the land. Look at what he says in Leviticus 25:11 and 12. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. Ye shall not sow, neither reap that which groweth of itself in it, nor gather the grapes in it of thy vine undressed, for it is the Jubilee. It shall be holy unto you. Ye shall eat the increase thereof out of the field. Well, what's the increase? It's what God gives you. And God's going to give you plenty. Just like if you remember having to do with the manna. You know, he told them, you go out and you get enough manna to last you for one day and one day only. If you don't, you gather more, it's going to rot and worms will come out of it. But lo and behold, come Friday, they were allowed to gather twice as much because they were allowed to gather for the Sabbath day. And guess what? They gathered the extra, and because they were obedient to God's will and God's law, no worms grew in that manna the second time, well, the leftovers that were there. This is just telling us they could easily live off the land and the fruit of the summer harvest for the time God had commanded. But they could not gather and put it into storehouses. This year of Jubilee would also be a sabbatical year, which meant, again, the land must not be worked. It had to be allowed to be rest. There was a way in which, again, there was something to this, that the year would generate, the ground would generate better produce after resting for a year. It also speaks of the coming of the Lord and reminds us that we have a coming rest in Jesus when he comes again. He has done everything needed, and we find all the blessings that we need in him. He is our sufficiency. We don't have to worry about waiting and not harvesting or something else. We're looking for him. In that year, when one was set free, he was also not to go away empty-handed. Deuteronomy gives us the law in a little bit better detail. If you will, look at Deuteronomy chapter 15. We're going to look at verses 12 through 15. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock and out of thy floor and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. And now I want you to look at this last verse. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing today. Do you remember when they left Egypt? What Egyptian did? They loaded them up with goods before they left. Listen, it's the same thing of remembering how that God blessed us. This has to do with being gracious because God has been gracious to us. It is reminding us how much God has graciously given to us. Even the poorest of men could rest because they were set, when they were set free, they were given a portion from those to whom they had been indebted. It's a wonderful picture of the riches and blessings of becoming a child of God. This passage also exposes the heart of the matter, that of a willing bondslave. We are willing bondslaves, and when we were set free, we have been blessed. There would be a time of plenty for all. In Leviticus 25, verses 20 and 22, 20, 21, and 22, and it shall, and if ye shall say, what shall we eat the 7th year? Behold, we shall not sow nor gather in our increase. Then I will command my blessing upon you in the 6th year, and it shall bring forth fruit for 3 years, and ye shall sow the 8th year, and eat yet of old fruit until the 9th year. Until her fruits come in, ye shall eat of the old store. You see what God will do? He will always provide for us. That's what it's teaching. In summary, for me, when I began to look at that, it is a lesson, first of all, for us to forgive our debtors. It is the Lord's release. We forgive our debtors for the Lord's sake. Israel was never to refuse a loan because of the year of Jubilee was too close. He couldn't say, oh, not going to be worth it to me because I'm going to have to forgive your debt. No, look at what Deuteronomy 15:9 says. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying the 7th year, the year of release is at hand. And thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be a sin unto thee. We need to be very careful, because we think we will be disadvantaged. You will not be. Be generous. Be compassionate. Be gracious. We are never to harden our heart toward our brethren, nor are we ever to give grudgingly. This year of Jubilee was never to be a reason to harden the heart or become less compassionate to poor brothers and sisters. Just like we know from Galatians, we are never to be weary in well-doing. What does he say? Galatians 6:9 and 10, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith. Israel, like us, is to remember that they were once in bondage. And they were not sent out poor beggars. They were sent out with Egyptian riches. Why? Because, again, they were to remember that God released them. In Deuteronomy 15 and verse 15, now shalt remember. In fact, I'm going to give you 4 different verses, all dealing with the same subject here. Thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing today. Verse 12, or chapter 16 and verse 12, this had to do with the free will offering. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and thou shalt observe and do these statutes. Also, again, they were not to take advantage of the stranger, the fatherless, or the widow. They were to be liberal in their giving. Deuteronomy 24 and 18. But thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. When the harvest time came, they were to remember the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Do you remember, even when we look at Ruth, and we look at the fact of the harvest, and there was a purposeful order given to make sure that they left. A lot of times they were not to harvest the corners, but there was an order given to make sure that you dropped handfuls on purpose. Well, of course, that had to do with Ruth in particular. But let me show you Deuteronomy 24 and 22, where it says, now shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Egypt, therefore I command thee this thing. The year of Jubilee was a reminder of greatness of God's grace. How in the world were the Egyptians convinced to give the Israelites of their riches? The only way that could happen was by God turning their hearts. Didn't mean they were saved or they were doing good. It meant that God changed their hearts. The year of Jubilee was a reminder of the greatness of God's grace and the majesty of his mercy. we then too ought to be gracious and merciful to others when we have the opportunity and the availability to do so. The year of Jubilee, Israel's Jubilee, it affected all of their economy. Remember, you can say, well, it only happened once every 50 years. Yeah, but all their loans, all their selling themselves into slavery, their money, a lot of things, all were affected by when that year of Jubilee would come up. There's more to it, but we're out of time on that. But I pray that's been a blessing to you and an encouragement. And we'll go ahead